So I'm going to throw our first question to Ryan. Tell us about your career journey. How did you land your current role, and what does your day-to-day look like?
Thanks. I'm happy to be here, and thanks, Chris. The day-to-day is very different for me because as a filmmaker, we're on set and we're producing branded content, which is original short film productions with brand partners that get distributed on the greater Warner Media Network with CNN predominantly as our place that everything lives. So day to day can be very different. Sometimes I'm in the office and I'm concepting and ideating campaigns and film concepts, thinking about how they're going to manifest both on the commercial breaks, but then also potentially on social, and how those versions change and how those stories change based on the platform. So there's some pre-production ideation points, but then I go out and make the thing. So that takes me around the world. I've been, glaciers in Peru at like 60,000 feet elevation with a full kind of caravan of people. So that day is very different than today. So it's a nice healthy mix. So I love what I do, and my path started in post-production as an editor. I realized that the industry at the time when I started, there was a shift in platforms from Avid editing programs to Final Cut Pro. And I just decided to learn the new program as best as I could. And that gave me some really good edge to get into the industry because everyone was looking for Final Cut Pro editors, right? So I got some early gigs from that. I freelanced and then I found myself working in experiential marketing, and then I started running a department, and then I started producing more and then directing more. And then I went back to school and I got my master's in branding. So I had an undergrad in film and a master's in branding. And that's kind of where I've landed in my career path today, which is trying to find the balance of a brand's voice and character and a story, right? And we have to make entertainment first and foremost, and make it enjoyable, right? So that's kind of how I landed where I am.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Ibrahim, same question. Tell us about your career journey. How did you land your current role, and what does your day-to-day look like?
Oh, thank you for the question. Thanks, Crystal, for having me and everyone here as well. So my journey started in Singapore, where I was working at a bunch of different agencies. And I think the most memorable one was when I was at Ogilvy. A lot of it started with curiosity. I think I started off in the social team, and I think a lot of my career has stayed within the industry of social. A lot of it started with being very curious about how the platforms work. And I think back when I started in social media and how we function as brands on social was very, very different. Everything was very experimental. Everyone was still learning how all of it worked together. A common phrase was building the plane as we fly it. And I think that curiosity always led me to be playful on the platforms and understand what made audiences do what they did on those platforms. That allowed me to sort of progress in my career. At one point, I was leading Nestle across Asia and doing their digital strategy. A couple of years after that, I moved to New York, still part with Ogilvy. And a lot of the brands I worked on, I moved to the more B2B space, and you sort of see a lot of similar trends that work across different industries. Fast forward, last year, I joined McKinsey as the head of paid social strategy and operations. A lot of my day-to-day looks like I work with a lot of different stakeholders to sort of understand what are the problems they face, what are the challenges that they are trying to address through paid media, and understanding how can we influence audiences, how can we understand how we want to show up in a way that not only audiences want to engage with us, but also understand what is the value exchange as a brand that we can integrate with the way audiences view our content. McKinsey is very famously known for thought leadership, and that's a big part of what we push out on social. So a lot of my role is getting the right content, the right thought leadership in front of the right people, and getting the visibility of the work we do. So yeah, my day looks a lot like meeting a lot of stakeholders, understanding the challenges they face, and thinking of solutions of how can we get the right content, the right thought leadership in front of the right people on the right platform.
Thank you. John, tell us about your career journey. How did you land your current role and what does your day-to-day look like?
Of course. So I'm going to be very honest. My non-interview first job was actually right out of college, and I had it for all of 2.5 months before I got laid off because I just wasn't ready to be, I guess, in Manhattan. But then a month later, I got a job at a small advertising agency on Long Island doing social, right? So this was organic, community management, ads, strategy, selling, pitching to clients, all of it. When I was doing, excuse me, when I was doing ads back then, it was like Facebook ads had just started, right? And it was a mess. The system was a mess. The buying platform was a mess. It was all entangled. But it's definitely come a long way since then. Anyway, so fast forward, for 7.5 years, I spent at advertising agencies. After 2 years at that first agency, I moved on to Ogilvy, New York. I actually worked with Ibrahim for a little while. There, I spent the last I was there for 3 years. I spent the last 1.5 years as the associate director of paid media for social, where I led the whole US social paid media team, where the majority of our goals were to really drive conversions and business goals for clients. So whether that's a sale of a product or a sign up for a credit card, you name it, I really did it. I worked across many verticals and led many teams, driving many different vertical business goals. From there, I moved on to one more advertising agency where I became a director of performance marketing for a fully integrated digital marketing team. Again, really geared toward those conversions. And there, so my teams there ran paid social, programmatic, which is pretty much the ads you see everywhere else on the web that isn't social, paid search, connected TV, all of it. Anything that was digital and you could buy an ad for, my teams handled. So from there, I moved to where I'm at now, which is I am the senior marketing manager for Amazon Live. I know I went from being a director to a senior marketing manager, but titles between companies change. And anyway, so at Amazon, I work for Amazon Live, which is we take influencers and Bravo, celebrities, Real Housewives, Bachelor Nation, and they come and they live stream on our page on Amazon, pretty much selling Amazon products, giving them deals, communicating with the viewers. So my role there is to drive users to Amazon Live to watch and engage with the video, and then drive sales of the products that are featured in the video. To do this, I use a lot of vertical video because we partner so much with influencers and creators. I partner with them a lot for Reels and TikTok and, brief 6-second selfies, like come check out this live, to drive a lot of views and sales. There's a lot more to it, but overall, that's my main goal for Amazon Live right now. And I just started the program for Amazon Live when I got here a little over 1.5 years ago. They hadn't done any paid digital, so I've really gotten a chance to build it up for this product. So it's been really exciting.
Thank you. Thank you. Ibrahim, what qualities and skills or traits should students possess if they're looking for a job opportunity telling a brand story or a video on a video platform?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think a lot of it, that I think the biggest advantage a lot of students have right now is you understand the medium. You are on the platforms, you actively engage with the platforms. I think a lot of times students underestimate, the level of depth of understanding of how people consume video based on their own consumption behaviors. Something I always like to encourage is whenever you are using a platform itself, go beyond your consumption and try to understand and be curious about not only how you consume, but look at the people around you, look at the people you engage with, and be curious and understand how they are consuming it, what makes them excited, what kind of content is engaging to them. We have seen the world of, and I think Ryan probably can talk a lot better about this, being in the film industry, but from a social standpoint, I think we have seen the video industry massively pivot with the introduction of TikTok. And I think a lot of what that signifies was TikTok was a birth of audiences moving from consuming videos based on people they follow and very specific curated content to wanting to be more on an explore algorithm, where an algorithm sort of shows them more of the kind of videos that they have shown a pattern of liking. So I think for a lot of students, I think the unique opportunity is, if you want to understand how video works for a brand, you can first start to understand how video works for you as your own personal brand, what kind of content you create and what makes your audience excited. I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of video creators as well. And I think a lot of them who have their own personal brand and create their own personal video can very easily translate and use those strategies and those thinking for a brand. And understand how a brand could show up in a way that not only speaks for the brand, but also allows their audience to be captivated by the message. And I think the last thing I would say is, I think a lot of times, sometimes as a brand, brands forget that most of the time audiences are on this platform to be entertained, to want to stay on and consume the content. Someone once told me, which I feel like is a great quote, that when you look at content marketing or video marketing, it's often like going on a date. If all you talk about yourself, there probably is not going to be a second date. So really understanding what your audience enjoys consuming and creating that experience where they want to keep coming back for more. And I think brands who have done that, and I think students who can understand which brands are doing that and keeping that in their back pocket, I think can be a huge asset when they start thinking about how to create videos for brands, or when they're interviewing with companies, highlighting to them what their audience should be wanting to consume from a brand like theirs.
Thank you. And Ryan, what additional qualities and skills do you think students should have in reference to what Ibrahim was just speaking of?
Yeah, I mean, everything Abraham was saying was on point for where we're at today for, native platform generation, right? Like those that are digital native. I have a 7-year-old son, and I have an 88-year-old grandmother, and we live in the same household. So seeing their understanding of platforms and TikTok, which she still doesn't understand at all, but my son understands. And but also kind of being very mindful of where culture is moving. I think when you're thinking about your own future and career, it's important to try to really think about where the curve is heading, where culture's moving. I think in this stage, qualities that you can start to think about are what are those timeless qualities, right? That really go beyond just the fad, right? Because there are, especially in this digital kind of ecosystem, it's very competitive. Snapchat was a hero for a while. Now it's TikTok. The players change pretty consistently, right? Instagram and Facebook's acquisitions change the algorithm, they change how they act. So you have to be constantly learning and innovating what you are doing from a platform point of view. But more important, I think, as a creative, as a storyteller, as a filmmaker, if that's how you're pursuing this opportunity, and you think of this as maybe a way to keep the lights on while you pursue other, narrative endeavors, or you have that film you want to make, but that maybe marketing and advertising has been what keep a consistent meal on the table, right? That's kind of how most approach this. But I think if you can put some empathy on just the value and culture that brands have, right? The Nikes, the Apples, the Patagonias, the Subarus, when you say these names, they don't just elicit what they make, they elicit feelings, emotions, and expectations that are tools as a filmmaker and as a creative. And then the platform is simply the medium in which that is being expressed. The idea that you're going to get into like a deep binge watching experience on TikTok isn't proportionate, right? It isn't the right platform for that. Being aware that people are in that scroll, they're in that headspace, kind of what Avery was talking about, kind of building something, knowing where the attention is for that platform. How do you engage? What is served to you? That's optimization for that, but that doesn't limit your capacity for what I call universe building. Other people call it 360 campaigns, right? Where their idea is the core, the heart of your creative should feel like there's a through line, that there's a thesis that's cohesive and consistent and consistently building and pulling the audience deeper into a more robust story. TikTok's just the way to kind of tease them in, or Instagram's the way to tease them in. Get their awareness and get their curiosity, get their interest, but do it in a way that continues the conversation and allows for additional exploration. Because next thing you know, the evolution of that conversation could lead to any medium you want, features or shows or series or theater, any type of expressions on the table. And I think that's what's fun about this industry right now, is that we're seeing the limited capacity of what traditional advertising has been capable of doing. And with our digital natives that are kind of dictating the new order of things, they have a really good attenuation ability to kind of cancel out the noise. And that makes us have to show up with quality entertainment that they don't want to skip, because everyone is just a swipe away. So.
Great, thank you. So as our students try to start developing their skills without a lot of professional experience, does your company, where am I? I'm sorry. Does your company, John, this is for John, does your company consider TikTok and or Instagram Reels mock-ups from people that are interested in working with you? Would that be kind of a consideration, given that the students don't have a lot of professional experience at this point? That's for John.
Yeah, sorry. So I would say at Amazon, it's a little tougher. I think it really depends on the size and scale and what the goal is, right? While I'm not sure how it would work from that perspective, because we do have insanely strict guidelines and protocols to follow. I know that when I worked at a couple of the other agencies, maybe not Ogilvy, but two of my other agencies, we were constantly sourcing UGC content, which is user generated, which is not from the business. We were taking email, because some people really love brands and would make content. And, we would sometimes, the brands would get emails of, whether it was images or photos or videos of kind of people using them, and we'd figure out how to get those into market. So I don't know if it's necessarily as much freelancing giving us videos, but I do think there's a large benefit to, if that's what you're interested in, curating your own TikToks, your own Reels, your own content, right? And then being able to use that when you go and you talk to these brands on these interviews, and kind of having it to show, like, here's the type of creativity I could do, here's the way my thought process works. So when you have your foot in the door, you have these examples to show, even if you don't have direct professional experience or, the exact business years they're looking for, you will have this content that you could show to show where your thought and how you can be if you were to get that job.
Sounds good. Would that also kind of adhere to your business, Ibrahim? Is there a way that these students can kind of showcase what they're doing on Instagram Reels and with TikTok to kind of be almost a mini calling card for them as they start to try to develop their skills?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think there's different ways to sort of look at this. There's a book called Show Your Work, which I definitely would recommend the students to grab a copy if they can. A lot of it sort of is the thinking that, especially when you're a student and when you're trying to discover a craft and you're trying to get better at a craft, it's important not to get hung up on trying to make one really good video. And it's more important to create as many videos as you can for this specific example. And to sort of echo what John was saying, right? I think a lot of time what employers are looking for, they're not necessarily wanting to see a specific quality of what video you can produce. I think they're just trying to understand what you're thinking behind it. What can you learn from it? You know, has there been certain strategic skills that you have gotten to sharpen as you've created hundreds of videos, right? I think going back to my previous point of also understanding your audience, I think when you're in an entry level role, if you have done a large amount, a large quantity of any kind of video making or content production, or even being on social pages, what it then gives you, it gives you the ability to have the experience to talk to your employers about what are trends you notice, what are certain even analytical skills you have picked up, trying to understand the numbers, understanding what performs, how do you quantify things. So I think there's quite a large variety of skills you can pick up by trying to do this craft and trying to get as much exposure of the craft. And I would encourage students to not focus so much on what the output is. You don't need a viral video, or you don't need a viral social page to be really good at it. I think is to focus more on what's the thinking that goes behind it, and not to be afraid when you're in an interview to highlight to the employers that how you've been curious, how you have been trying different things and not being afraid to fail, and really just understand what it has taught you. Because I think the mindset is more important than the actual output of the video.
Great.
Just to add one more thing, sorry to cut you
Sure.
off.
Yep.
I also think it's about, like, when you're doing this and being able to show you can stay on top of some of these trends and staying up with the industry is also a huge benefit and plus to when you do get to talk to some of these brands and employers.
That's important. Thank you very much. What strategies do you implement to ensure that you're capturing people's attention, especially given the overstimulating nature of social media, right? And then the high volume of content that's available to view. Ryan, would you like to speak on that for us?
Sure. The attention challenge is always, I mean, it's ongoing, and it's ever changing, and it's getting shorter and shorter. The average consumption time of video content on mobile is 2 minutes on average. So that's taking all the short scroll, tiny little moments, and all those kind of long immersive. And I think that's actually getting shorter. So that number is actually pre-pandemic. So I'd be curious to see where it's tracking today. But, you know, I think the attention component, I think, goes back to expectation and where we are, what our headspace is at, right? If you're in a theater and the lights are off and your phone's in your pocket and you are there with your popcorn, I mean, you're already primed for a certain expectation of attention. You can kind of have that lingering dark, you know, foreboding open that takes 5-10 minutes before anything's even done or seen or moving as far as plot or action, right? But you can't do a 5 to 10 minute, you know, mood setting for a TikTok video, right? So there's a certain element of, as a storyteller, as a filmmaker, just an acceptance of where the audience is when they're going to be consuming your material. But then more importantly, like, what are the tools of the trade that elicits and brings people to a certain point of emotion that you're getting them to, right? Are you trying to give them shock? Are you trying to engage them in a certain type of way? That should align to the bigger campaign strategy, right? If I'm trying to get someone to feel emotionally invested in a heartfelt way, it's very different than getting them excited of, you know, like an action-packed or sport oriented to kind of gear them up and getting an adrenaline pump going on, right? So that's the difference between maybe like something for Jaguar, right? Or versus like Subaru, right? Like those are very different identities, right? So attention, there's a lot of tactics and best practices of, you know, opening on a face, and there's algorithms that will tell you things that may hack or cheat the system, you know, opening on a dog face or this. But those things are kind of reactionary to what culture and audiences are doing. And the moment they start to get used to it, then it shifts, right? So if you start chasing the fad, you know, I think it's important. Algorithms data, they're helpful, but they're in the past by default. So if we make choices exclusively from data, right, we're essentially driving a car by only looking through a rear view mirror, right? The road stays straight, it's great. But if culture, society, world events, pandemics, wars, anything changes the conversation, that road can curve out in 1,000 directions and you feel like you have no idea where you're going if you're thinking about the data that you have in front of you. So that data is more real time today. It can be a little bit more reactionary, and the time to make content on these type of platforms is shortened. Making a film is like a year and a half on fast track, right? So that's why that delay of cultural relevance feels a little bit more of a delay with films, TV, all these things that are big lifts of production. While TikTok is so reactionary, so in the vein and pulse of culture, people are already memifying something that happened 20 minutes ago. So it can be frantic. So it's important to kind of stay the course of what are you after opposed to what are you reacting to, right? So because you want to tie it back to a bigger campaign, to a bigger agenda, to a bigger point of view, which means that you need focus on what you're trying to accomplish and achieve. So I think it's important not to create just to be a part of a wave. I think it's important to say, how can I create, acknowledge the wave, acknowledge what's going on, but create towards a bigger thesis, a bigger agenda, a bigger conversation that really connects with people and an audience. And if there's a brand involved, there's clearly direction of what they would like to compare and connect into their own language and identity.
Thank you, Ryan. That was fantastic. How much research is done on the audiences you want to connect with, John?
So at Amazon, the customer is always first, and we're always trying to consider the customer, right? And at Ogilvy, every pitch, media strategy, campaign build, report started with who the consumer was, or who the target consumer is, right? What do they like? How old are they? What are their demographics? How do they behave online? How do they behave on each social platform? What's their favorite apps? We have ability to do deep consumer analysis for particular industries and categories. So the idea is to understand who the consumer is through and through. Like, I know that our average consumer spends 2 hours on Spotify, they scroll through TikTok for an hour, they use Uber, etc. And so now I know the placements, I know what they like, and I know where to target with them. So now that I know all of that, I can combine which social platforms work, what type of video content it is, understanding where the audience is in the journey in their purchase journey is another huge component, right? Because that affects the messaging of the content that you have, right? So in my world, best practice is to have your CTA as close to the beginning as possible, but call to action CTA, I apologize. But what that means, call to action can be different things, right? It doesn't just have to be buy this product now. Your call to action for it could be you want to build awareness for your brand or create an engaging post. It should just be there right away to be able to get that message across, because like Ryan was saying, attention spans are so short that you really need to be able to get that point across quickly with compelling content to that audience in their part of the journey.
Thank you. Is it similar, Ibrahim, is it similar with how you all approach it?
sort of thinking through again around, how much research do we do on audiences? I think there's a lot of different parts of understanding the audience. I think, there's a strategy part up front where you do research to try to understand who your audience is. And in an ideal scenario, how can you talk to this audience? Where do they live? What can you understand about them? Where are they consuming content? But I think where I see the most value most often of the time is trying to understand how your audience is interacting with your brand, how they are engaging with your content, and really figuring out ways that you can bring value, right? I think, even trying to combine a little bit of the previous question as well, I think it's easy to get attention from audiences, right? You can literally pay to blast messages and videos and ads at people. I think those that are doing it right are ones that understand in its depth, what does the audience really care about? What makes this audience want to stop and be like, this matters to me? And then ensuring that you're getting that message that, hey, I'm a brand as well, and we are aligned that what matters to you matters to me as well. And you see in the industry, right? You have brands that have just spammed their way with ads and has really very little understanding of their audience, but has spent billions of dollars to just get the attention of their viewers. And then you have brands that understood that, hey, it's risky to talk about certain topics. You have brands like Nike that took very big risks to talk about things that they believe mattered to their audiences. So I would definitely say it's super critical to do your research. It's super critical also to be honest as a brand, that is the audience you're going after aligns as a brand with your values and what you're trying to achieve as an organization beyond profit. And go from there and understanding, is there a match, and ensuring you're reaching the right audience with the right kind of content.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about how you create a social video. What's the process of producing a social video? How many people are on the team? What are their different roles? Can you talk a little bit about that, Ryan?
Yeah, I feel like it's a slightly hard question to answer, because it's like, how much would this video cost, right? Or how much time does it take? Me and an iPhone, sure. My son and I would make during the pandemic an entire short film series where we filmed it all in an hour and edited it in two. And we had a tiny little short, and it was great. That's a day, and the budget's nothing, right? And that's a team of one. Today, with technology and with what's available, you can obviously be a jack of all trades. And I think that actually becomes a challenge for creatives, because they see that opportunity, and it's typically how you learn. I remember one of my first early roles, I remember trying to on my resume, I put like, producer, director, writer, like all of it. And then I was like predator, right? Like it was all of them combined, right? And then I was like, oh, I'm just a predator. But when you start forward slashing your identity and your roles, it becomes harder and harder as you advance in your career to understand how to really discipline and how to really focus on key attributes of your creative talent. You may be a director, you may be a producer, you may be a cinematographer, you may have a very good visual eye, right? And there's entire departments and support structures as a project gets bigger. The medium doesn't necessarily limit or dictate that team or size. It can be executed with one person, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the ones that you see out there are. Sometimes there's a lot of support. There's makeup, there's hair, there's lighting, there's sets that are built, there are locations that are permitted. Anything that you see that feels like it didn't just belong in the world, somebody had thought behind and had to place there. And if you've ever planned any type of event, you know that things can get very difficult, and it's like herding cats, right? So when you watch a film, you look at the end, you think about the credits. I mean, the credits go on for a very long time, and there's all those people and all those jobs that are tied to it. So it is interesting when you say, as a creative or as a creator, what does that team look like? What is that? Earlier on, it is good to learn them all, because then you can grow and have empathy for those roles as you advance in your career to potentially get bigger crews and bigger budgets and bigger projects. But the one thing that's a benefit is small is quick, you know, and if you can be nimble, then you can be kind of one-to-one with culture in a way that other content creation, like I was saying earlier, that timeline does delay the reaction. So it's all about purpose. If you're trying to make material that is very culturally connected in the moment, comedy is one of those things, you know, like that you're trying to be reactionary and it's pivot, but it's also kind of scary to have something come out real quick, because sometimes the reaction or the gut reaction we see, as we were talking, Abram was talking about brand safety, right? Having a small team with autonomy to go out and just make real quick things, that may not be the best strategy if you want to be very respectful of certain kind of, you know, guardrails for brand safety. You may be, you know, slightly off on a side of a conversation because in the morning, you know, the culture and society is leaning one way, and in the evening it's leaning another way, depending on how things are going. And that swing is so aggressive in today's climate and culture that I think it's, you know, that's a different conversation. But the side of, you know, the production team, you know, it's tough. I mean, the one benefit I would say that the team has, or that people have today, is that you're capable of doing it yourself. But I would, you know, employ all the students that are making, if you want to make TikTok channels, maybe don't star in it. You know what I mean? Maybe be the director, be the creative, be the strategy behind it. You be the one-man band or one-woman band and, you know, do it all. But don't also be the talent, because then that really makes it hard to make a bunch of stuff. If you find like 3 or 4 friends that do one thing really well, help them shine, be that creative foil for them, and it sharpens your tools. And now all of a sudden you have 3 or 4 different channels that you can claim creative ownership and identity and you know, kind of use that as your portfolio instead of everything being about you. I think today influencer identity, YouTuber identity makes it feel like everyone has to be everything and even the face. So that's a lot. You know, I'd say take that pressure off yourself, focus on the tools, focus on the craft, and just create. And remember that a rising tide lifts all ships.
I love that. Thank you. Ibrahim, if I or a student had content or products that they wanted to promote via social media, what video first marketing strategies could they use?
Yeah, great question. I'm trying to think about it without getting too technical. I think ultimately, you know, it would really boil down to the what kind of products that they're trying to push out through the video. But I think I'll sort of follow a similar thread of what Ryan was also saying, that I think, you know, there's quite a spectrum of, you know, the kind of quality of video or assets you can create. In my time, I've seen a lot of people, you know, create content and videos with very little equipment and very little tools. And I think the main takeaway should be to start. I think that's where most people get hung up. I think a lot of people have a lot of ideas, have a lot of things they want to do. They think about it a lot. They have a lot of strategy, but I think the way it all often fails is they don't start. And I think that's where I loop back to that book I said, which is Show Your Work, and very nicely put it that the best way is to just start and do as much as you can and learn as you go. Be it a product, be it, you know, what like Ryan is saying, you're behind the camera, you're taking content of people who can do interesting things, and go for it and see where it lands you. If one thing my career has taught me is that you truly can't connect the dots moving forward, but you can really connect the dots moving back, that the different things you decide to experiment with, and it'll lead you down interesting paths. I'll give one example, a little bit maybe more focused to paid social media, which I'm more specialized in. I had my start because there was a bakery that needed help with their social media. So that's where I started, because I was like, I don't know anything about it, but it doesn't seem that hard. And I had a budget of $100. And you just learn how to buy paid media with $100. You get curious, you go onto the platform. And, you know, 10 years later, here I am. You know, it's like like if you told me then that starting out in a bakery with $100 budget for paid media, that curiosity would lead you like halfway across the world in a very different firm, I would say I don't think so. But that curiosity and that drive to just start and try and experiment, I think is where, the mindset should be. And that's probably the most exciting part of being a student and starting your career, because you have a lot of opportunities ahead of you, and you should be by no means in a hurry to pick something and commit to it for the rest of your life.
Thank you, Ibrahim. And this is for all of our panelists. Can you, and I'll start with John, can you tell me what steps your company is taking to diversify their staff?
Of course. So it's actually a really big deal for the last few companies I've worked for. Diversity, inclusion, it's imperative, right? And what we do is, I know from an HR level, they are currently working to, ensure that there's minorities and different genders, and really any person has an opportunity as long as they're qualified for the job. And we've been instructed to make sure that we go into these conversations that we have with potential new employees, to not carry in any bias with us, to leave that outside of work, and to just hear what they have to say and allow the conversation to get you to if they're qualified for that job or not, but leave all your predetermined notions out of it. And it's super strongly recommended, but even after the conversations, we have these, after you go through the interview process, we'll have these conversations to discuss, internally, to discuss the interviews themselves. And and there's one person who's kind of like the moderator, and if they feel bias coming into the conversation, they will call it out and ensure that it gets corrected and kind of negated off of the pros and cons topics. So yeah, it's really important. It's a continuing initiative for us, and we continue to try and strive to be as diverse as possible.
Thank you. Fantastic. Ibrahim, can you speak to that as well at your company?
Yeah, I will. So I'm still fairly new at McKinsey, but I also can sort of speak more broadly for McKinsey and the different companies I've worked for. I think a lot of companies, this is a very important topic. I think a lot of companies are changing the way they have their recruiting processes, really, using a magnifying glass to really understand, are the recruiting processes fair? Are we ensuring the right level of opportunities being given across the board? Something that am particularly very passionate about, and I think I've been very fortunate for the companies I've been working for, that has also been a priority, is really thinking about mentorship, right? I think we live in a world as well that it's very often very easy to want to mentor people that you see your younger self in. And often, if you're part of the majority, you'll naturally look at people who look like you or seem like you. And I think that's where the biggest opportunity is to sort of, how can we break that cycle? How can we bring different people from more diverse backgrounds into more leadership positions, or in more different roles that historically were not occupied by someone from different groups or different diversities. So I definitely feel like a big part is the conversation on mentorship. And I think a big way for us to elevate different groups of people is to not only be a mentor, but also be open to being a mentee, and really looking at the people around you, and being, I think I would encourage a lot of students as well to not be as afraid and be open to reaching out to a lot of people on LinkedIn that I believe are very open, even in my organization and the agencies I've worked for, that people are very open to wanting to mentor and being able to give you a hand and encourage and advise to really show you what kind of opportunities could exist for you, and guide you along the process. Because I think a mentor can really help you navigate a lot of these situations, and really get your foot in the right place, get your foot in the door in the right places, and help you also navigate tough situations that can often be the case when you belong to a minority group. So yeah, I'm definitely very fortunate and very lucky that I've been given a lot of opportunities in my life. And I always believe it's good to mentor people and be a mentee to get yourself similar exposures.
Ryan, can you speak on that same topic very quickly? Thank you.
Yeah. I think, I mean, on to Abram's point, I think mentoring, I think, is a big component that I've seen both in, you know, my world over at Warner Media and Courageous Studios. And I think finding partners that, you know, are willing to kind of take on that challenge with you. You don't have to do it alone. You don't have to figure it out. It's a conversation. And no one's going to solve it in one fell swoop. But I think, you know, I think it's about taking your intent beyond just feeling and into action and into plans that start to manifest in actually meaningful ways. And for example, I think, you know, one of the campaigns that came out from Courageous Studios that I'm actually, you know, super proud of them for is the Milestone Initiative. So the Milestone DC Comics was a you know, a line of comics by predominantly African American and you know, creators and artists that kind of got shuttered back in the 90s. And they're re-engaging it, but they're doing it with the mentoring program in partnership with Ally Bank. And you know, the Milestone campaign's like a 10-week immersive training course, you know, with new talent that are coming to be spotlighted and to be mentored. And that program, which started on, you know, March 15th, it creates an opportunity, you know, for Black and diverse storytellers in the field of comics, right? So that's just one execution, but it starts manifesting on the reality that, you know, things haven't been fair. They haven't been right, and we need to start putting effort and energy into making it so, you know, and I think mentoring is a big component of that, right? So that's just some of the things that, you know, are happening on our side.
Thank you so much. So now it's time for us to take some of your questions. And who do we have first? I think, let me see. Please tell me your name and your school.
Okay, hi, I'm Shilpa. I'm a mid-career professional, and this is a great panel. So thanks to the Center for Communication. And I think I got it from Made in New York. So yeah, I've been a director and producer in New York for probably 20 years, doing, you know, commercials, music videos, working for a lot of the major networks. And the points that you were making just now about diversity, like often I've walked into offices where the entire floor is, you know, homogenous men, basically. And so now as a mid-career person, I'm submitting my resume blindly often. And it's like a very confusing, you know, I've been a mentor and I've hired people myself, but I feel like you just go into this vacuum of, you know, on the back end of some company site. So do you have any advice on that for mid-career professionals? Because I've, like, you know, been there and done that, and I'm not a 22-year-old applying out of college or starting out. And I've done social media campaigns, and I've done actually even for McKinsey in-house or other, you know, commercial entities. And I've worked with the mayor's office also and gotten all the permits and everything. Yeah, so I mean, it's like you can be a first adapter to every new medium that comes out, but then there's still a lot of barriers to entry, even as a mid-career, you know, woman, and especially a woman of color applying for different types of projects. So since you guys have been talking about that, do you have any commentary or advice or anything? I don't know.
Specific advice for you, Abraham, would you like to give Shilpa, how do I say your name?
Shilpa, yeah.
I'm so sorry. Can you address Shilpa?
Yeah, I can try. So a great question. I think I can speak from my personal experience. I think something that has helped a lot, I think, is the power of LinkedIn. I think I often encourage people, be it wherever they are in their career, that do not underestimate how open people might be to meeting for a coffee and to get that understanding of what could be roles open in their organization, or how to navigate. I think it's a very common fact that I think a lot of people know. We live in an era where you do need to know someone in an organization to have a good shot at getting in. And I think, like you're saying, you know, especially when we belong to a minority group, I think it just makes it harder. I think the best advice I feel or I have experienced is, you know, reach out to people on LinkedIn, reach out to people that you know, that you have connections with, and really see how you can navigate those conversations with them and see how you can figure out what are the gaps in their organization that you could help bring value for. Yeah.
Thank you, Ibrahim. Now, who is our next person to ask the next question? Thought I saw someone. Hi, Mia.
Hi, thank you guys so much for doing this. This is awesome. I was so excited for this meeting tonight. So I'm from Seton Hall University. I'm graduating this May, and I've already taken on some freelance roles for content creation. I do my own thing kind of on TikTok as an influencer, but I don't really struggle with the follower count. What I struggle with is the engagement rate. And I find that a lot of companies are looking for, you could have hundreds of thousands of followers, but if your engagement's not there, if that's lacking, they kind of look down on that. So my question that I submitted was, do you recommend to have a certain niche to be successful on TikTok? Because, for example, if I post something about beauty, I'll gain following for beauty and they'll want to see more beauty moving forward. But then if I'm marketing for a tech company, then my followers from beauty that I grew and are relying on me for these beauty tips don't really have interest in that. So although I have those followers built up, they're not sustainable because I want to always cater to them and what they want to see. But when I'm working with brands, it gets difficult. So is it possible to not have a specific niche and still be successful? Or do you suggest I kind of change track?
John, would you mind giving me your advice?
Yeah, of course. So I think my biggest advice there is to be genuine to yourself, right? Because the best way to get those engagements is if you're building that trust with your audience, right? So, because I work with these influencers and creators really on a daily basis at this point. And I will tell you, like, some of our most popular, you know, most efficient or best traffic driving creators are, you know, they talk beauty, they talk fashion, sometimes they talk home tech. But because they are always kind of being real to them and giving their own opinion and, you know, not forcing it, right? They're being true. So that is, from my experience, the best way to do it. That or kind of stay in one niche. But I would recommend the first one.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And let's see, who's the next person?
I'll be asking the next question on their behalf. It's Ashley Park. She's unable to join us on screen. But her question is, what was your recruitment process like post-college to secure a job in your industry right after graduation? What tips, advice could you give to the students in those positions right now who are struggling to secure career opportunities?
Ryan, would you like to speak to that?
I have like the most untraditional path, but sure. I think it actually is apropos to probably the advice though. You know, my personal journey was I started working as a freelance editor while I was still in college, and I got that job because I was a bartender in a bar in East Village, and one of the regulars was a guy that was an editor that used Avid, and he had a friend of his that was an Emmy Award-winning editor that was getting a job using Final Cut Pro, and he said, "Oh, Ryan, you keep on talking about Final Cut Pro, and mine's better. You should be his assistant." And I essentially got a job editing for a music festival for, Bruce Springsteen and Foo Fighters. It was a multicam project, and I was basically a puppet to a far superior editor, and it was like the best masterclass series I could get. And he basically taught me how he edits by me having to execute on his behalf. I think early on, I was a logger and transcriber overnight shifts. So that is, believe it or not, we shot on tapes, and we would have to digitize those tapes to be a digital file. And in order to do that, you'd have to put it into basically a really expensive VCR that would convert it into a digital file. And what I would do is watch it in real time as it was digitizing and transcribe word for word a reality show. So I got to watch the real reality show, right? So I use these two examples as a case for, it's never too early to start. I did this while I was in college. I also worked at Starbucks as a barista and a bartender, so I get it. It's tough. I, split an apartment in Bushwick, and I was paying like $400 a month for rent. And, I remember thinking in my head, I could just make $800 a month, I'm good, like for life, like I'm good. And, I got my first job offer to run the video department for MKTG, which is an experiential marketing agency, on the day of my wedding, which was a year after I graduated from college. But they were one of my freelance clients. So, I think it's important just to kind of say yes to any gig, any opportunity, especially if it uses a tool that you're trying to sharpen, not be above the grind, as sad and as frustrating as that can be early on, but always take on opportunities that give you something to learn and grow in. And if you keep doing that, what Abram was saying, it's hard. I love that. It's hard to see how the dots connect looking forward, but when you go back, it seems like, oh yeah, that bartending job very clearly landed me here at Courageous, right? But and remember what makes you you. I think that's very important. Everyone has an unfair competitive advantage. Mine was bartending. I'm good at talking to people, so I keep doing that.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Ryan. Let's see. The next question is from, what's your name and what school do you go to, or what school are you from?
Hey, hi. I'm Michael. I went to Hunter College, but now I'm actually working at the Center for Communication as a fellow. I just have a question sort of about, do you guys have any recommendations for social media strategies for artists, specifically like musicians or maybe painters or filmmakers, people who don't necessarily have a platform to be hired for, or people who, or don't really have anything to sell, just sort of want to get their artwork out there and engage with audiences? There's so much content out there, and it's, you guys were speaking to the oversaturation sort of social media. So I was just wondering your thoughts on that.
Ibrahim, would you like to?
Sure. Yeah. I would definitely preface this by, I am not an expert in the arts industry or the music industry. I can only share from whatever I've been able to experience in my time in the industry itself. I think something to think about is, and I think this actually goes back to John's point, right? With a lot of creation of these things, I think is really looking at it from the perspective of what is the objective of what you're trying to do, right? I think for a lot of artists, if you love your work, you love your art, you love your music, I think the goal should be focus on that, right? You can publish it on any of the platforms. And if you love what you do, I think the success metric should be how much are you loving that? How much do you enjoy each day to just look forward to creating your music or your art? And I think everything else will be a secondary consequence that happens in whatever way the sort of the universe transpires for you. So I would definitely encourage, keep doing what you're doing, do it on potentially every platform, and people will find you. And there's one thing I've learned about social is people have a way of finding you, and the people that enjoy your craft will naturally gravitate towards you. Just give them an opportunity to discover you, right? So just put yourself out there. Don't focus on the numbers. I also always encourage people, don't create things that, especially if you're an artist, don't create things that give you engagement, because then you're building things for someone else. Be true to yourself, do what you love, and it'll take you places to wherever you need to go.
Great. Our next question is from an anonymous attendee. And I think we've touched on this a little bit, but they would like to know, how did you land a job as a freelancer?
Let's see. Well, John, I don't know if you were a freelancer before, so let's go back to Ryan.
Yeah, that was word of mouth. You know, I think it's important to kind of share with, it's a little bit of fake it till you make it to a certain degree, right? And I think that everyone has that challenge. I still have that challenge every single day. Don't let anybody confidently tell you that they don't feel that way, because they're lying to you. Everybody's going to be taking an inherent risk. What you have to have faith in is your ability to work as hard as possible, and to give your best effort, right? And if you did those two things, you really can't be disappointed in the outcome. So freelancing, I think a big part was whatever your skill set is, speak passionately on it, share passionately your interest in it, and then, put the word out there. I mean, that kind of goes back to Abram's comment on, you'd be shocked on how many people, will be responsive to LinkedIn. I've given jobs to people that have just, cold called me, reached out, showed me their work. And sometimes it works out. Sometimes timing works out. They end up a PA on set or something like that. And just, get the word out anywhere and everywhere. I think we're kind of, reopening the world, hopefully a bit more and more every day, so, and I know during school this past, 2 years, this advice is like a painful pill to get, like, oh, just go out and get coffee with people. And they're like, yeah, I can't, I can only ask them to Zoom, but you'd be shocked how many people just would jump on a Zoom like this and chat. I've personally done it to at least a dozen people in the past 2 years from different, parts of their career. So I would say that, it's kind of goes back to the age old, networking advice. And I would just say my 2 cents on networking is, share what you're excited about, be curious, come to the conversation with an intent to learn something, but also be a listener, hear and try to think about what challenges the person across the table or the screen has, and if there's anything you can do to help them. Maybe they're on the hunt to find an interesting, new influencer or creative, and you may have a hard Rolodex that is interesting. Sometimes making a recommendation of something to watch or engage in that you've noticed is very helpful to someone like that, right? So try to be as helpful to them as they're being to you, with the tools and resources you have. I think you'd be surprised and shocked on how many you really do have. Sometimes your insight, perspective of the world actually is a big value.
Crystal, if it's okay, I would just like to add 2 points on my end as well. I think one of it being, we live in an era where technology is really your friend. One great hack I always like to share with people is, one of the most powerful things that you could also leverage is the school you went to, right? Just go on LinkedIn, search for alumni of people who went to your college, who went to your university, and just search all those people and see what cool jobs they have, and just add them and share a message with them and tell them that, hey, it's so cool what you're doing. I want to learn how you're doing it. Is there any way I can help you? Is there any way I could do some freelance work for you, or just learn from you? And I know when you're a student, it's hard to find commonalities to connect with people. So use your school. The alumni of your school is the best possible network of people you can start with, and then just go from there. And the second thing I would say is, there's a huge list of websites like Upwork and Fiverr, where there's a huge list of freelance jobs for you to potentially don't be afraid. I know a lot of people have come to me and be like, I don't feel like I have sufficient skills, or my resume is not good enough to do a job like that. I was like, what's the worst that could happen? You could screw up on the job. You might not get paid, but you would get some experience, and then you move on to the next, and not be afraid of just keep trying. So yeah, I would strongly encourage, like, leverage these sites, leverage LinkedIn and your alumni, and just put yourself out there. You will be surprised what might come back and what you might end up learning from it.
Excellent, excellent advice, Ibrahim and Ryan. Thank you.
We've got another anonymous question, but I do want to encourage our audience, don't stay anonymous. We'd love to see you on screen. If you can get your questions in quickly, we do have a few more minutes. So a reminder to pop those questions in the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen. And in the meantime, can you talk about what makes a campaign successful?
Ryan, can you speak to that, please?
It's a hard one. There's success from a creative point of view. There's
Ryan, I'm
yep.
sorry. I meant to throw that to John. I'm
Oh, sorry. Yeah, take it, John. Because I think you can actually speak to it better.
Yeah, that was my bad. I'm sorry, John.
Success.
Go ahead.
That's okay. And I mean, that's a fully loaded question, right? Because as I think Ryan was even starting to say, it really depends, what was the goal originally of what the campaign was, right? I mean, like I was saying earlier, the majority of my work was to drive actual conversions, but I worked with teams who the majority of their work was just to get the word out on the brand, right? So before you could even say what a successful campaign, what a successful video is, you need to understand kind of what you're looking for, what the purpose of that video is, or of that content, right? Like if it's to create awareness or to give people more knowledge, that's how you could determine it, right? And then based off of how you determine what you're measuring, and then you could look to see at the end of it, during it, how you're doing compared to what you thought your goals were. But setting those goals first, from my experience, is always the way to go, because then you know how it's tracking and you can measure it and make changes based off what your end goal is.
Excellent. Next up, we have a question. When applying for these kind of jobs, what other platforms other than regular social platforms should I be familiar with?
I'm trying to have a think. I think one thing I think can be quite useful is a lot of the, I would say, mid to big size companies, they tend to have very robust referral programs. So what I always encourage is that, you know, it's really good to sort of narrow in what kind of roles you're interested in and what kind of companies you're interested in. And I think the first channel you can really consider is trying to connect with employees of that organization and see if you can get a referral link. Often that also means that your resume gets seen by the recruiter and the hiring manager, and just significantly increases your chances of getting a role and getting an interview. So yeah, I would say first one would be getting a referral from someone from the company. I think the second one, beyond LinkedIn, I think would also be, you know, websites like Glassdoor. I don't recall a lot of the recruiting sites off the back of my head, but there are a lot of recruiting sites that post a huge number of roles. So I'd strongly recommend that. The third thing I would recommend is a lot of companies offer great associate programs. So I would really, really encourage you to search for what are the different associates programs. I remember when I was at Ogilvy had a really amazing associate program that allowed you to have rotations across different departments. You get exposure to the leadership. You really get a lot of experience in a very short period of time to just give you an understanding of what you like and what you don't like. And there's no better time to join an associate program when you're fresh out of college. So yeah, I would strongly recommend referral programs, all the different kind of recruiting sites, and associate programs that a lot of the companies offer.
Thank you, John. Do you have any?
One thing, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think just to not build off what Ibrahim was saying, it's hard to necessarily do without some of those LinkedIn and social networks, because of, you know, even getting the referral, connecting with that person you didn't know is much easier on a place like LinkedIn, right? So I think that the real answer is, it's not about using other sites. It's how can you use other sites and people you know and connect them with social to work for you most efficiently, right? It's like, because after those connection sites, there's no perfect match. So how can you combine things to match and work for you? That's all I would add.
Hello, my name is Isaiah, calling from Brooklyn. My question was, how do you kind of navigate, if you still have it, like imposter syndrome, as well as helping people kind of navigate their area in media? I'm also a barista at Starbucks, so trying to figure out my way into a different career based off of being a barista, but I still find it very difficult, just kind of like believing in myself and feeling like I can do that. So I just want to know your advice on that.
Barista to barista, fellow partner.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, once again, I think it's important to, every job you have, every moment you have, every life experience you have is uniquely your own. And you come out of it with lessons that only you have acquired. And that shapes a certain perspective that you get to offer. And it's different. Everyone's is different, right? And creating anything requires a lot of different perspectives, right? So I think as a barista, funny enough, like to me, I always thought of it as like the daytime bartender, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you have your regulars, you know, and you have your flow and you figure out your station and you chat. And I know it's tough now, especially with mobile ordering. I felt like really bad because I'm like, man, this has turned this into a social third space, to a completely different experience. So I definitely feel for you, because I'm sure it's like,
Yes.
you're probably like drilling, you know, the recipes in your head to make the cups and flip, you know, as many cups out as possible. But
Oh, yeah.
that's always the rush hour, right? There's always the spikes. There's always the lulls in between. I think those are opportunities to remember that you are in this very interesting place. Brooklyn, New York, not sure what store you work at, but I guarantee you the people that are coming in and out of there are interesting people.
Yeah.
Right? And those are people that you have a connection with every single day. Right? And that's an opportunity, right? Share what you're excited about, share what you're passionate about, and be out there in every step of the way. And I think the imposter syndrome never goes away. It never will. It will carry with you. I'm taking on bigger, steps in my own career, and literally as I'm signing agreements to make those moves, I'm going, do they know that they're offering this to me? You know, did I trick them somehow? And that's always going to stick with you, you know? And I think it's important to make sure that you remember that everybody feels that way. Anyone that says differently just lied to you. And that's okay, because at the end of the day, fortunate for us and our journeys, we are not in a situation that we have somebody, you know, on a table in an operating room right in front of us with their hands on their heart, right? The worst case scenario of you messing up is actually not that bad, right? And I think if people give themselves the freedom to remember that every day, that the worst case scenario is really not as bad as you think. Because I've had those worst case scenarios. I've had campaigns that have blown up in my face completely, critiqued, ripped apart, and I was like, wow, that was a big old fire mess. But learned something, figured it out, and I didn't make the same mistake twice, right? And I think it's important to remember that as you continue your own path. So whatever form of creative art that you have as your heart, as your passion, stay true to it. Keep sharpening those tools and share with people your passion. You know, I bet you tell people, you know, that are coming in what you're passionate about, they're going to ask to follow you eventually. You know, and that's a bigger conversation. And one day that might be me. And I might be like, yeah, I like talking to baristas all the time.
Very nice.
I think, you know, I know exactly what that feels like. And I met my own wife at Starbucks, funny enough. So
nice.
I have a big place in my heart for that place. And I think you're at a unique opportunity there if you take advantage of it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This
I
question
appreciate
hits this question hits home, so I'm gonna jump in again because apparently that's what I have to do. No, but can I be honest with you? Imposter syndrome. I feel like an imposter right here, right now, if that makes sense. Like, do I know what I'm talking about? Of course. And do I have all of this experience? Yes. But like having that confidence, right, is key. And if you can just believe in yourself, people will believe in you, right? I won't be long, but I have one quick example. I remember when I was at Ogilvy and the associate director at the time was moving back to Belgium, and the head of the US media department and the owner of the subsidiary under Ogilvy I worked for sat down with me and were like, okay, you're going to be this role now, and then you're just going to report to the director in Belgium. And I was like, I can't do this. I'm not as smart as my AD was. Like, I'm not going to be able to handle this role. And before I knew it, like everyone was asking me questions and like taking what I said and running with it. And like, I wasn't an imposter. I was doing it. But like, it doesn't ever go away. Like Ryan was saying, it's just how you handle it.
Okay.
Definitely all of us here have been where you are and can very, very much relate. One of the things I felt like has helped me a lot in my journey is, I think, finding people in your life that can be your cheerleader. And every time that you feel like this is not something I can achieve, this is not a number I can reach, this is not a job that I can ever do, having that one or two people that look at you and be like, you're being ridiculous. Like, why would you even entertain that thought? Having that people that just encourage you and make you push for higher heights, I think it's the most important thing you can have. I've always been very fortunate. I've had that people around me. I've been in the same situation, John and Ryan, where I also get a job offer and I was like, this does not make sense, and it's the people around me who be like, no, that's what you should, that's what you deserve, that's what you can do. You are capable. I came from Singapore, other part of the world. I could not even think that I would be in New York right now and the roles I'm in. And it was always the people who are just like, just keep doing what you're doing. You are able to do what you want to do, and surround yourself with people who what your dreams are the norm to them. That's the life to live. And you'll soon realize that what seems impossible is really not. And it's very close to your reach. And you just got to believe in yourself and give it time and you will get there.
Thank you. Wow. That was nice. That was great. Thank you.
So happy
Thank you.
everybody jumped in because we all have had that feeling and we continue to do so. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I want to thank everyone that's participated, especially Ryan, John, and Ibrahim. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you for everyone that's participated. And now we are going to close. We're going to post the recording of the webinar on the center's website. So look out for that and have a great evening. Thank you so much, everyone. This was fantastic.
Thank you for having us.